For Friday, July the 4th, we talk about Bioshock Burial at Sea in this very special bonus level continuation. My name is Cole Ross.
I'm Dennis Furia.
I'm Dave Smith.
And this is Gary Butterfield.
And you're listening to a continuation of our bonus level about Bioshock Infinite, talking about the Burial at Sea episodes. Possibly a distinct game from Bioshock Infinite? Who knows? I don't know. Continuing, tying everything up.
There are an infinite number of DLCs, and all of them have constants and variables.
All of them are 1,200 Microsoft points.
Yeah.
Infinite number of Microsoft points.
It really was a swan song, because right after that came out, they switched away from Space Bucks to Earth Bucks.
Thank God.
Yeah, for real. Man. What's that, 3 episodes or 3 podcasts we've talked about that on?
Well, it's monumentally dumb.
Yeah, it's
like it is worth talking about.
It's super stupid.
Yeah, it's remarkable. Like, it is a cliche, but it's also stupid.
Yeah, it can be both. Yeah. So, Bioshock Infinite Burial at Sea. We're talking about film noir Bioshock. Sign me up, brother. At least for 20 minutes.
Yeah. Yep. It is. It starts off, and it's also just super fun to go back to Rapture.
Yeah.
I feel like that's part of the intention. Like, Rapture, right? Wasn't Rapture great? Rapture was great. And also, like, here's Rapture before everything went to shit. Isn't that cool? And the truth is that it is very cool for a while.
Oh, yeah.
And it's like, and we'll let you have a weapon wheel. And,
yeah, why that bothers me so fucking much. Like, that is such a tacit apology, I feel like, for Bioshock Infinite, because there's nothing, like, if you're in the sky, that doesn't change how many weapons you can carry.
Oh, clearly
there's no reason
for them. It does change the fact that you can only carry like 10 rounds for each weapon now, so you're trading guns for ammo.
Well, but I mean, there's no reason for that part of the engine to have changed if they're going to go back to this. True. If they wanted to do it, if they stood by their decision of having 2 weapons, they could have done 2 weapons in this as well.
See, I actually didn't notice that you had multiple weapons until a significant way through part 2.
Yeah, same here, actually.
It's weird that we would start this off talking about the weapons, because you really don't see them for quite a long while.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
This series does good intros.
Yeah. Oh, for real. Like, you see Columbia in its, peaceful stasis, right? Mm-hmm. And in this, you see Rapture in a way that I kind of always hoped to see it, which was, pimps trying to justify why they sold women.
Yeah. Yeah, it's super disturbing.
Yeah.
See, I felt like
boy.
I felt like this really. There's a significant degree to which I didn't like the original Bioshock, because I felt like you needed to see this to contextualize it. In that,
to see that the people there were complete monsters who opted to live in this society?
I would say, 2 things. I would say, one, just the fact that, Bioshock, as you saw it, was just always a crappy place. So a lot of the utopian stuff didn't make sense, because there was never a time when it was beautiful and, at least on the surface, everything's awesome.
Mm-hmm. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
The other thing is, I felt like it was interesting to see at least some of the positive sides of the Bioshock philosophy, in that, for example, in this society, apparently being homosexual, a minority, or transsexual is completely okay. So I felt like it was also good to pull in the fact that there are at least some positive elements of the hyper, crazy ass objectivist thing.
Yeah. Maybe it made it feel like less of a caricature.
Exactly.
Coming hot off the heels off of Columbia, where anybody who was a single tone variation off of white, it was definitely like a little bit of a shock. Like, oh, okay, here's this thing, but you know that obscures greater sins.
Yeah, they're monsters in other ways.
I'm not saying that people aren't monsters. I'm just saying it, like kind of like what Dennis said. Like the original Bioshock, I felt like one of its weaknesses was that the characters were such characters that it kind of weakened some of the story.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have time to get into stuff about Bioshock. Like I disagree pretty strongly with like a lot of that. But I think that whether it worked one way or another, I think what the way that Bioshock attempted to address that was through like the remnants of what you saw. Like that, that's the System Shock 2 DNA, where like you're getting that through audio logs and the like. Yeah. So you never got to see by Rapture in its glory, but you got to hear these stories of people, when it was better.
And it's got to be a pretty deliberate choice to make it so that in both episodes of this, you're only ever in shopping centers.
Yeah.
I mean, like you're in a mall here, and you're in a department store there, like pretty much invariably.
I hadn't thought about that before. That is interesting.
Yeah, where it's like, okay, everybody's money spends the same, but in people's, I mean, that's a little bit of what made like Point Prometheus or whatever work really, really well. Which is like, oh, you're seeing how they exist in their own private lives, which is the same xenophobia that is inherent to humanity that doesn't, kind of try to nurture its better angels. Right?
Right.
Yeah.
I also kind of felt like there's a certain degree to which I'm assuming it was maybe like technical limitations, but I felt like Bioshock, this version of Rapture looked like what I always kind of thought of the Rapture looking like, whereas the original Bioshock's Rapture, except for some of the pubs, easily could have been like any generic Doom space station.
Yeah.
Again, System Shock.
Right, yeah, could have been System Shock. Whereas I feel like this one much more doubled down on kind of the Art Deco and stuff like that.
Well,
I think was good.
It reduces the number of years to 0 because you're seeing it like you're not watching a Houdini splicer. You're watching a waiter who happened to use a plasmid to teleport, to increase his productivity as you're walking around, and it's all couched in this film noir, aesthetic.
Yeah, and you're doing a lot of walking around, and there's plenty of detail. Like you could spend easily an hour just listening to the dialogue between random NPCs.
And I did.
Yeah. Same here.
And I'm not like Mr. Finds Things Sexy in Video Games guy, but Femme Fatale Elizabeth worked.
What's that euphemism for?
Well, no, I mean, like worked insofar as like going in and trying to grift people by being like, oh, blah, 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 blah. Like, okay, that's sold. Like, it actually sold that time had passed between now and then, right? Like, this is a different Elizabeth than we left her at the end of the main game.
She pulled the whole quasi seduction act without coming across completely like as uncanny as happens in most video games.
I mean, I'm not going to say like I was, rock hard, but like it sold the aesthetic before it did kind of disappointingly like abandoned it.
Yeah, no, and what I would say is that, there is just a twinge of style. Well, not just twinge. There's a lot of stylization to Bioshock characters.
Yeah.
Like that world has not a Pixar aesthetic, but it is definitely not trying to be photorealistic.
Oh, for sure.
I think that's what allows it to work.
I never cranked it to, Femme Fatale Elizabeth. Let me make that abundantly clear.
No one is accusing you of that.
Okay,
for sure.
Cool. All right. No, but like, just like in terms of like the way the character behaved to try and get what she wanted, like, it totally fit in terms of the mode of media that they were trying to manipulate up until you got to Sandra Cohen's place.
Right. Did you guys fail any of the attempts to sneak into the back?
No.
Could you do that?
Yeah, and it's almost as good. So in the jewelry store, I didn't realize, how stealthy I had to be, and I just kind of traipsed on backware. back there, and the guy immediately is like, "Hey, you can't be back there. I can't believe you go back there." And Elizabeth doesn't miss a beat, and she's like, "Well, I can't believe you would sell fake jewelry." And
I did do that actually.
Yeah, yanks his attention back to this and like accuses him of like stealing her family ring, and it escalates with her knocking him out.
Huh.
But it's like she's a very smooth operator, following this femme fatale thing of like, clearly you've been spotted snooping around, and so she just starts throwing a fit so that you will have as much time as possible to sneak around back there and prod around, even though you've been discovered.
Yeah.
Which again, I found that I was not expecting that. I was expecting guards to crash in and to drop into a shooting segment, and so that they handled it that way was really nice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was expecting it to all be this way, and then we went to Fontaine's, or more appropriately to Goins. I was disappointed. I like, out of all the combat stuff, I liked the Burial at Sea Episode 1 combat the best.
I definitely liked it a lot better than Episode 2.
Yeah, but I think, and Gary, this is the thing you hated in the main game. It was because of the scarcity of ammo, and the reason that I think it worked in Episode 1 versus not in the main game was it was completely possible to avoid fights in Episode 1. So there were distinct sections where I was like, I don't have enough ammo to take on 4 guys. I need to go around another way. And it wasn't quite the stealth of Episode 2, but it was kind of choosing my path and my timing to avoid fights.
See, I turned into a thuggish splicer, and basically they can't shoot you as long as you hit them once every second. So just hit each member in the group and rotate.
Yeah. Go ahead, Gary.
Well, I was just going to say, like, I think that the whole of the DLC, part of the idea behind it was to rectify some of the things in Bioshock Infinite 1. And one of the things I think they wanted to do was add some variety to the gameplay, which, like, I think we all kind of agreed Bioshock 1 was lacking. Yeah. So they do that really obviously in Episode 2 with the stealth, but even in Episode 1, things just feel different. And part of that is introducing those Bioshock world things, which I mentioned before, where, like, there are security systems now.
Yeah.
Like there are standing turrets that aren't terror related that you can hack. Like they bring back a lot of the things like that nuance to your verb set that was missing.
And more 4-digit combination locks than I will ever want to see again. Like, what the hell?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the bigger thing is scarcity. Not bigger than what you were saying, Gary, but in general, like just the idea that you really had to make things count this time around.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I really thought Episode 1 nailed it.
Yeah, I felt like it really fit with the tone in that, to a certain degree, this is almost like, this is what I wish all these zombie games people keep making would be like. This is what I wish, what was the second Dead Rising game where you're in the...
Dead Rising 2?
Oh, Dead Rising 2.
Was it just 2? Have they not gone to coloning things yet?
No, just Dead Rising 3. That's it's pre-order on Steam now.
Okay, whatever. It's like I said, did not sleep last night. So yeah, no, this is. I really felt like it also fit with the tone. And Gary, early on, you asked, did this game have to be a shooter? I feel like this is a game that shows like it maybe could have been a stealth game, if nothing else.
I feel like when I asked that question about Bioshock Infinite, it's because Bioshock Infinite I felt was more interested in character and story, whereas like the Burial at Sea stuff, like, and this is I realize that I might be the exception in the group and feeling like almost all of the play elements of all these games were really limp. So I didn't enjoy the shooting that much in Burial at Sea either, even if I enjoyed it a little bit more than Infinite. But like, whereas Bioshock Infinite, I felt like it could have been an adventure game because the shooter seemed to contrast with what I thought it was about. Burial at Sea feels like it is about being an appendage to Bioshock Infinite. And in a way, like some of the mechanical stuff felt, even though it might have felt a little bit better, felt even more perfunctory because like I agree with David ultimately, I think, in that like this is meant to kind of put put a bow on and recontextualize Bioshock Infinite more than anything. Like, it doesn't really stand alone as a experience or as a story. Like, it's weird. It was so weird to me during the interview when he said, like, none of the DLC was planned before, because, like,
that's crazy.
The big, like, thing I took away from Burial at Sea was, like, so many of the changes and things were direct answers to criticisms of Bioshock Infinite. Like, and knowing that didn't come, it wasn't planned initially. Like, that just makes me feel very suspicious. Like, oh, people didn't like the violence. Well, let's do a stealth section where, like, you can't kill people. And, oh, people thought it was ridiculous that Fitzroy sacrificed that child, because it was fucking ridiculous. Well, let's explain that. That wasn't her. That was the Lutesses, Like, there are just a lot of little elements that felt like this was an apology for Bioshock Infinite. Like, oh, we get it, guys. You're right. Those things were dumb. Here's a way to make it, again, square the circle.
Yeah. I would say, though, like, how many times have we, had something done and be like, they just need to acknowledge that it was dumb and fix it. And so I'm wary of criticizing them too much for doing that, because they don't, I feel like this is the balance between Mass Effect 3 and then fuck you guys, it is the way it is.
It feels like panic to me, like, especially episode 2, like the given the timeline that things happened, they can't have been developing episode number 2 without realizing that, like, dudes, the window is closing. Like we will not have enough time to actually, like, bear out the things that we thought we would have enough, like, room or lead distance to, like, bring reconciliation to. Like, and so that brings to, you Gary, saying, like, oh, a lot of this is them apologizing directly to the camera for some of the things that they did, which is like they knew that their time was short. This was some kind of, like, cosmic level deadline shit where they knew it was going to, like, come to a close. And so, like, the neatness and the hastiness that they brought everything together and stuff that kind of seemed like it was parallel lines, all of a sudden was, like, at a right angle coming towards each other, like, at this one singular point. Good. What?
Are we still talking about gameplay?
I mean, it could be anything. Like, honestly, like, I mean, the crazy the crazy departure that it takes from, episode 1 to episode 2. Not to mention narratively, but gameplay wise, like, episode 1, we never said, like, hey, this is Elizabeth coercing Booker into going after this surrogate daughter that he brought in together, and not sure if he wants to do what it takes to solve, to save her. But ultimately, like, oh, it's her passing this weird little border that she can never uncross, and then pulling everything back together after that, right? Like, it is both a very stark narrative and very stark gameplay departure between those two things. And I think that there has to be some degree of knowledge on the studio's part of, like, we have to tie up everything we possibly can, no matter how kind of improprietously neat it has to be between now and then. Like, it's got to be pretty quick and pretty neat for us to do this in the time that we have to say what we have to say, right?
Right.
Yeah, I would say that definitely the episode 1 and episode 2 were much more focused on kind of drawing the connecting lines between Bioshock Infinite and Bioshock than they were about any kind of greater themes. Like, the theme was, we're connecting these two.
Yeah. I mean, and that's foreshadowed in a very nice way. Like, at the beginning of episode 1, you see, like, oh, there are some medals from, the Battle of Wounded Knee. Why would Booker, who was ashamed of that, keep those around? Like, the reveal that this is a Comstock that you're controlling is a pretty big deal. And it explains a little bit about what happens in episode 1 in terms of both Elizabeth acting very coldly toward you and just kind of the just general lack of surprise around you mutilating some splicers in Fontaine's department store.
Yeah.
Just wanted to hop in here. Does this seem a little bit weird to someone? I did the math at this point in the game. Booker should be like 70-something.
No, the Lutece machine has it has accelerated his aging.
No, but I'm saying even if you just count the years, like if it's he should be something. If we say he's roughly 18 when Anna/Elizabeth is born, then the events of Bioshock Infinite take place 20 years later. And then the this takes place I think 30 years after Bioshock Infinite.
40
that
years,
would place him at like late 60s at the very youngest.
Well, the corpse he leaves is old. Like when you look at his corpse at the beginning of episode number 2, or even at the beginning of, at the end of episode 1, he is a white-haired, bearded old man.
And I think the tough thing is,
saying,
yeah. No,
I'm saying more he's not going to be being the action hero at like 60 something.
I suppose, but also like there's also the matter that this Comstock opted to come here to escape his guilt after having sacrificed Elizabeth. Like this particular Elizabeth in this story, lost her head in the portal
actually
closure.
got killed.
Yeah.
Through the tear,
as opposed to her pinky.
I feel like people listening will be more likely to have not played the DLC than the main game. So maybe a brief synopsis.
Also, don't listen to this if you haven't played the DLC. But
hey, I use podcasts as a surrogate for playing the game all the time, so I understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
Listen, watch out for fireballs on Duckfeed.tv.
So,
yeah. Also, listen at work and also on your commute. Continue, Dennis. I'm sorry.
I was going to say, so maybe like a very high-level synopsis is in order.
Mm-hmm.
Could I maybe take this? Because this is actually what interests me most.
No, yeah, do it.
Take a shot.
My overall take on it would be after Bioshock Infinite, reality gets compressed down into one for the main characters. Ultimately, what that leads to is Booker still sells his daughter, and Comstock still wants her as a messianic figure. Elizabeth still being around, realizing that now, being outside of things, attempts to intervene, and with the hope that she can basically keep Elizabeth from ever going to Comstock, and therefore things will basically be all right. She's semi-successful in that she is able to change things and get Booker to redouble his efforts, but ultimately that ends up with, instead of just the pinky getting cut off, the child gets straight up decapitated.
Yeah.
In his guilt, Comstock eventually ends up going to Rapture via the Luteces, correct?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And Elizabeth basically comes... while at Rapture, he adopts a orphan. However, she disappears.
Sally.
And yes, Sally.
Yeah, Sally. And he goes to Rapture to escape. Like he genuinely feels bad about what happened to Elizabeth.
This is penance. So as opposed to using the Luteces to figure out how to advance his own means, he escapes into this other reality where
and
he never killed
his old memories.
Yeah, never killed his own daughter.
Yeah, exactly.
Right, exactly. And in this case, he adopts Sally, kind of, again, probably as a way of, subconscious form of penance. But ultimately falls into gambling, and while he's gambling, she gets kidnapped. He, believes her to be dead, but Elizabeth basically comes and offers to help him find her.
Which is where the first episode starts.
Yeah,
right,
like he doesn't believe her to be dead. He actually lost her to Cohen.
Well,
no, I think he believes
she's dead.
He believes that's good as dead, and Elizabeth shows up, kind of promising, like, "Hey, maybe I can get her back."
No,
yeah, because he has a friend on the police force that tells him that he saw the body.
Right. Yep.
And also it's in terms of like characters remaining constants. He also at some point reveals that he tortured Suchong, was it, for 15 hours?
For 15 hours, yeah. So Suchong doesn't have her, although Cohen does, and Cohen was the means to get her down to Fontaine. Which, I mean, come on, Gary, Fontaine.
Yeah. I was very happy with the amount of Frank Fontaineism in this. Even though he is like actually scary in this in a way he's not in Bioshock.
Yeah, he's really Which
only makes sense if you played Bioshock. Otherwise, he's just this Irishman.
Yeah, I know. Like,
I'm still going to give you a little lobotomy.
So ultimately, you eventually, shenanigans ensue, and you get to the point where you're going to save Sally.
Yeah,
Only to find out that she's a
little sister,
been turned into a little sister, and that Elizabeth has been using this to set you up so that you get killed by a Big Daddy.
Yeah,
just after remembering that you're Comstock.
Right,
for sure. Yeah.
And revenge.
Not even so much. It's the player that recognizes he's Comstock.
Well, and so does he. He regains his memories.
Oh, does he? Okay.
Yeah. What's funny is when his memories regain, his voice changes.
Yeah.
Right.
It's like, Elizabeth, I'm sorry. It's like you stayed the same age even though your memories are repressed. There's no reason you suddenly start talking like an old person.
You're not immediately deaf, dog.
So just to take the score at this point. In the one reality that's left, we have Comstock is now out of it. However, I think it's important to remember that Booker is apparently still alive, just with the body of his headless daughter.
I mean, maybe it's pretty much straight up admitted, outright, that the Booker that you're hearing in episode 2 is a construct of Elizabeth, having recognized how horrible the thing she does was, having sacrificed Sally, doing to her the thing that she did to her, or the thing that Comstock did to her.
Yeah, and then in the second episode. And I don't know if we want to focus on it with too much of a magnifying glass, but basically Elizabeth now is the one who has the change of heart, realizes that she's done a horrible thing in kind of allowing Sally to be sacrificed, turned into a little sister.
Yeah.
And so she goes on this quest to set in motion the events that will ultimately bring your character in Bioshock to Rapture.
Yeah.
And ultimately, if you get the good ending of Bioshock, to redeem all these little sisters.
Yeah, to save her. You can't stop Sally from being turned into a little sister. She's the little girl in the time of Atlas and Frank Fontaine. Right? You can't stop that from happening. It's going to happen. Sea slugs and whatnot. Right?
Yeah.
But it is specifically Elizabeth trying to reverse her action of using Sally as bait to get the very last Comstock out of the existence in the multiverse. The one Comstock who caused the one Elizabeth to lose her head.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I would say then ultimately, when she succeeds in that, she's finally broken the cycle of violence that was originally Booker, then Comstock, then her. Mm-hmm. And so now that's finally been broken.
Did you already mention that in order to do this, she had to make that deal with the Lutesses and she loses her powers and is no longer infinite? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
So
that's kind of the construct that the entire second episode is set up in, is now you are in Bioshock, or in Rapture, having accomplished your main goal of killing Comstock, but now you're starting to question, is that the reason I was there? I feel like there's something more I need to be doing here, but you can't really remember what that is.
Mm-hmm. Mainly because she dies.
Yeah, I mean,
several times.
Yeah. So right after the she lures the Big Daddy to kill Booker, in something that a omniscient person really should have seen coming. The Big Daddy immediately kills her.
Yeah.
So I would say a couple of interesting things here. I feel like we've got the good, bad, and indifferent, or in between endings, which is the Bioshock Infinite. You can interpret the ending to be Booker lives happily ever after with Anna.
No, you can't. What? I'm sorry, David, but no, you can't.
You wait at the end of the
Both
credits.
of them die like forever in perpetuity throughout the universe.
No, at the end of the credits,
they only die from the point where the baptism happened.
Okay.
However, after, if you watch the credits, he then wakes up back in his room on the day that he would have otherwise sold.
Okay.
Anne.
Yeah. Okay. So I am sorry for reacting so violently to that. It is every booker who ever said yes to the baptism. Okay. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And then after episode 1, the potentially horrifying ending is that all that's left is one booker whose daughter has been killed, just living a self-destructive life for all eternity. Then after Bioshock 2 would be the kind of bittersweet and probably the best ending, which is the cycle of violence is broken.
Mm-hmm.
Although this does raise the question, although she saved the little sisters, she also then, by definition, killed everyone on that airplane.
Yep.
Yeah,
this is true.
I mean, it's a video game constant. It's the conservation of care about protagonists versus non-protagonists. I don't want to gloss over this, but I fucking love the intro to Burial at Sea Part 2. Paris. The dream of Paris.
Because I was like, what the hell?
No, no, it's great in how incongruous it is. But like La Vie en Rose is playing as Seurat paints a landscape on the seaside, and everybody is saying bonjour baguettes blah blah blah, and then there's an honest to god red balloon as everything turns nightmarish, and then you notice like, oh, there's a sign for a lobotomist, and like everything is foreshadowed, etc., etc. Like it is great as a dream sequence, but after everything is tied up with a bow at the end, noticing how great that sequence is put together in terms of setting you up for everything you're going to see in this section.
So is that truly meant to be some kind of dream she had as she went through realities to start back at the point?
Yes.
Or
Like,
okay.
She had access to infinite worlds and infinite possibilities, but she never went to Paris. This is her waking up into her dying world, having dreamed of what she thought Paris was based on the book she read in her tower.
Yeah, so am I the only one that found it incredibly depressing that she never actually gets to Paris?
Oh no, it's terribly sad. Like she's living the life of a Disney princess that she lives in like the entire franchise up to this point, and she never gets to see it. And when you find out, like, oh, I'm never going to get to the surface of the ocean, like after she gives up her omnipotence and omniscience and whatever omni you want to append to her, right? Like it's incredibly sad, and that raises the stakes to a point that they were never really raised in any of the installments before this.
Yeah, and I mean, it's kind of the sacrifice that she views. They she saved the little sisters, but what they kind of imply is that act, since she is in essence the little sister to, they talk about both the Songbird and Booker as the big daddies, but since she was able to break the cycle in this world, that then changes the constant, breaks the cycle in all other worlds. So I think the stakes are a little, she doesn't get to Paris, but the stakes are a little bit higher than just one boat full of little sisters.
Oh, for sure.
I feel like
it's great that she disproves the entire the entire theory of rapture, which is that altruism is complete bullhooky, right? Like up through when you go through Ryan the Lion School in Fontaine's
Can we talk about that?
Yeah,
that
we can if you want.
Like that Ryan the Lion School it's got so much good stuff in it.
Yeah.
And again, not good from a moral standpoint, but good from a tone setting standpoint.
I really liked that they hit much more like actual objectivism in this one.
Don't share your toys.
Yeah. In terms of like, I felt like Bioshock, like it to a certain degree, its version of objectivism was just kind of very generic hyper-capitalism. But what really makes objectivism interesting is this weird moral component it has, to where it literally, like, Ayn Rand literally thought it was like morally wrong to give money to homeless people. Mm-hmm. She thought it was wrong to like compliment people because either if they deserve the compliment, then you're just telling them, what was already true. If they don't deserve the compliment, and you say, "Oh, you look nice today," then you're cheapening the very concept of beauty. Like this, I feel like it was much more effective to strike on this weird, like pseudo-moral thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. No, I mean, just coming out and saying, like, just from the very beginning, showing the hypocrisy of that entire Rapture objectivism, which is, back in the teacher's room, the teacher's edition is use possession on kids if they're unruly.
Yeah.
And then
I missed that.
Yeah. There's like a note, which is or a voxophone or whatever they use, audio log, which is if any kids are unruly, use possession to keep them in line. And then ultimately to the to the real payoff, which is as you're going through this and figuring out in Columbia what bonded Elizabeth to Songbird and what bonded these little kids to the Big Daddies was altruism. Which is, saving the, as the thorn in the lion's paw. It's the hypocrisy of the entire thing their, late society was built upon, which is help other people and they will help you. And everything they taught everybody, down to the sex, down to saying you need to make a contract about what orgasm you're going to get from somebody and satisfy the bare minimum to get that. Man, it's so gross. And just from a very philosophical standpoint, like proving the hypocrisy of all of that, I think that is the ultimate victory of this entire arc, which is like what it takes to bond somebody to somebody else is working to their benefit. Like that's the real heartwarming part of this.
They touch on that real briefly in the first Bioshock with the idea of Fontaine and his house for the poor. Mm-hmm. And like that being how he gets kind of his army, like if you give somebody food, they're going to be like that's always been kind of a thing, I feel like. Yeah. But they do a really good job of underlining it here.
Yeah, I think there though in the original Bioshock, the problem was that was ultimately him manipulating people to his end, whereas this is like looking at true altruism.
Yeah, this is knocking out every other possible alternative. Right, genetic, pheromonal, chemical, all these other things like Fink and Suchong passing these things back and forth as Fink drinks himself to death and Suchong gets cut out of the loop after Fink just figures out you can drink this stuff, right?
Cool.
Like ultimately it comes down to like if you help somebody, they're probably going to help you back like 4 times once you help them.
Yeah, I agreed. Like with the yes.
With the yes.
With the yes, it's late.
with the yes, it is very late.
As we draw to a close, the one other thing for people who haven't played it again is that they introduce a whole stealth system, which I feel like I've seen these. Is it the same stealth system that's in Dishonored, like the little lightning bolts above the head kind of deal? That's not been in Bioshock.
Dishonored was this bad.
Gary, go ahead. I think that you're better qualified to describe.
I think that the idea of like somebody seeing you getting a little, I know that you're there is in a lot of games,
right? But I mean that specific design, I felt like I'd seen. Oh, and the most similar thing I could think of was Dishonored.
It's not dissimilar. Like you do get little lightning bolts in Dishonored.
Yeah,
when you're seen or when someone thinks they've heard you.
Yeah. At any rate, you get there's like a whole stealth system introduced, and the majority of the game is meant to be played stealth, avoiding people versus any kind of conflict. And you're also given the option. Again, an apology for the main game. You're given the option to just knock people out versus actually killing them.
Yeah. And she even just says like, "I'm not you." And looks at the camera.
No, I think Booker says like Comstock's blood runs in your veins, but you're not Comstock. And then she's like, "Yeah, and I'm not you either."
Yeah, yeah. Like I'm not gonna do the same thing.
I felt like this system worked really well, both that theme and also for like recognizing the fact that Elizabeth was never a combatant.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, from a gameplay standpoint, it's pretty awful.
Yeah, I found myself, it was much more effective just to run past everyone than to try to sneak past everyone.
I mean,
that's entirely what I did.
That's stealth horror games to a T, though.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, you know, like getting seen isn't the end. Getting away from them is the end.
Right.
Yeah.
You know?
Right.
Like, I mean, I felt most satisfied overall with the play of Bioshock Burial at Sea 2 or whatever they want to title it, because it does give me the opportunity to get away, even when it forces me into situations that I otherwise would have loved, which is like, okay, Ryan is onto you, you know, in this Ryan Fontainiac kind of dichotomy. Like, both of them are coming after you, and it says, okay, set up a trap, and it's like, all right, I can kind of set up a trap, maybe, and this is what maybe like possibly 20 hours of play was setting me up to do. But I don't really want to. I just kind of want to like jump around like Nightcrawler until I can just get away.
Yeah, I like that, you know, ultimately Fontaine or Ryan traps you in a room at one point, is like, I'm going to send my goons after you, and then gives you some time. He's like, and if you don't surrender in 1 minute, I'm sending my goons after you. So you got the minute to set traps, and then proceeds to send one person at a time at you. There's no reason.
Yeah. Did you ever figure out a way to like stealth on those Houdini splicers? Like, whenever I'd try to sneak up on them, they'd just teleport away.
I mean, yeah, I never tried to stealth up on them. I tried to stealth away from them, and then